I'm Jeff Helfrich, State Representative for House District 52. Life's messy, government's messier. When I was on the street, I got to see what worked and what didn't work. And in Salem, I see a lot of things that aren't working. I want to cut through that red tape, get to simpler government, and get to stuff that works for you. Here's our next episode. That's perfect, right?
Back to Basics Army, I got a really special guest. I've got Matthew Drake. He's the CEO of Mount Hood Meadows. But more importantly, we're going to talk about the $17 billion recreation industry that's going to be affected by some trial lawyer lawsuits that have happened and our liability waivers. But also, I want to talk about Mount Hood Meadows. Matt, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Very, very grateful.
You know, I appreciated, my daughter skis up at Mount Hood Meadows on the Cooper Spur race team, and I go up there quite a bit. So I was a snowboarding guy in the 90s over at Timberline, but transitioned over to Mount Hood Meadows, and we go up there as a family. It's a great facility. You guys do a tremendous job.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, so in my podcast, what I do is I read your bio. So if you hear something in your bio that, Jeff, that's not quite right, change it. We'll get it corrected. But let's dive into this. Matthew Drake is a fourth-generation Oregonian. He has served and worked at Mount Hood Meadows for over 50 years, starting as a weekend worker in the 1970s, served as manager and board chairman since 2006. He is armed with a BA in economics from Vassar and Harvard Commercial Bank Management Program. He built a financial expertise with Morgan Guaranty Trust and Solomon Brothers before returning to Oregon in the 1990s to lead his family's century-old construction and property firm businesses. At Meadows, he manages 1,200 winter and 350 summer staff, generating an estimated $30 million in annual economic impact through innovative operations, year-round recreation, and environmental stewardship. In 2004, Warm Spring Ski Day program earned the National Ski Area Association's 2006 Silver Eagle Award, setting a national standard for tribal collaboration. A former board member of the National and Pacific Northwest Ski Areas Association and Oregon Governor's Task Force on Outdoor Recreation from 2019 to 2020, Matthew drives policies to sustain Oregon's $17 billion recreation industry while skiing, hiking, and championing rural communities. Thanks for being on there. Did I get it right?
You got it all right.
How about that?
Very good.
Hey, let's talk about your 50-year journey in life and from working at the family business and through school and leaving and coming back and how it shaped Mount Hood Meadows.
Well, I started working at Mount Hood Meadows for my older sister in 1968 in food service, an employment experience that kind of scars me to this day. But we both worked there because our dad had started this resort and we had very few employees. And and we had very few guests, actually. I think our first year we did 1,260 or 70 skier visits from January. We opened January 28th, I believe, 1968, and then closed in May. And so that's not that many people to serve in that amount of time. But at any rate, I grew up there. I grew up working on the weekends. I was in grade school and then high school, and worked there in the summer times and constructing lifts and things of that nature.
So I want to walk back just for a second. How did the family get involved in Mount Hood Meadows and starting a ski operation?
Okay, well, I'll try to just do a brief story of this, but my mom and dad were avid skiers. We had a cabin in government camp. I learned to ski at Multipore and Timberline and Summit, and my dad he was very adventuresome and liked to snowshoe and whatever, and we would snowshoe on the north side. And then one summer, I think it was the summer of '66, my dad read the paper every morning before we were all together at the breakfast table, and he found an ad in the back of the Oregonian that was an advertisement from the U.S. Forest Service to get requests for proposals for a new alpine resort on the northeast flank of Mount Hood. And
that was in '66?
Correct.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And my dad put together a response to that request for proposal, including investors, and most of whom were his friends that he skied with. And ultimately, his proposal was selected, and he spent the next 18 months building the resort. So our first, the summer of '67 was spent building the access road, the day lodge, which was very small at the time, 3 lifts, yellow, red, and blue, and a T-bar up T-bar Hill. And then we opened in January of 1968.
That's impressive. You never know how you look back in history, but I get to talk to somebody who actually was part of that process. That's pretty neat. That's a cool experience.
I was there. I was obviously very young, but I remember it very well, and I remember the hard work. Really, it was 7 days a week, and lots of work with the Forest Service. This is kind of when my dad introduced me. He was working with the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs, and we would go to Canada as a family and stay there. And anyway, that's when I first was exposed to the Warm Springs.
So what you just explained, I think some people would imagine, oh, these big corporations come in and build these ski resorts, take them over. But this was a true family operation. The whole family's out there working hard, digging the dirt, all those things. That's a fair statement?
Yes. My mother, like all the decor and the lodges, my mom designed, and some worked, some didn't work so well, but we
Who told her that it didn't work?
Nobody.
I'm sure, yeah.
We all thought it, but anyway, no, we started out, we had very humble beginnings, but with great intentions, because both my mom and dad just felt that it was very important, very much in line with Oregon culture in their era, and I believe still to this day, that folks learn how to appreciate the recreation opportunities that we have in the state of Oregon, which are just really significant, incredible.
Yeah, I think you look at around the nation, and Oregon has some of the most scenic. We can talk about how beautiful Oregon is, but just the access to BLM land, National Forest ground, the county ground and stuff. It's just incredible where you go to the Midwest, where there's a lot of things that are just all private property, and there's very few national parks. Colorado, I think, is an exception to that with the Rockies, but there's still a lot of private ownership within that state too.
Well, my mother felt that the family that skis together stays together, and my father felt that recreating outdoors builds self-reliance, builds confidence, and builds resilience. And so he just felt that was really something that he wanted to continue to champion, and that's part of his legacy.
All right. So who taught you guys how to ski? Self-taught, mom and dad? Where's that at?
Let's see. I actually learned how to ski, I think in the very early years at Timberline with the infamous Eric Seiler, who was director of skiing there, then became director of skiing at Mounted Meadows. But I mostly kind of just learned the hard way, because my sister was a good skier. She was 4 years older than I am, and just following her and keeping up with her, taught me a lot.
Yeah, I just kind of look back. You mentioned that. I remember my daughter, like I said, was on the Cooper Spur race team now, and son was on it for a while, and he decided he wanted to snowboard and try that. But I remember my wife trying to bring my daughter down the hill at Cooper Spur at the ski mountain there on the other side of the mountain there. And my daughter was having a meltdown, not having fun. And I looked at my wife, I said, I was a snowboard instructor. And I said, we will get them lessons, because trying to teach our kids is going to be difficult. And that was one lesson I took away from being a snowboard instructor. Trying to teach your spouse and or kids sometimes can work, but most of the time you end up not getting very successful at it. So
well, also we were working there, so we were only allowed to ski on our breaks, and so we tried to make the most of it,
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, so what do you think is your most recent achievement that you're proud of?
Well, we have many things. I'm proud of all of our team's accomplishments, because it's not just me. We have an incredible team. But we built Sahali Lodge, started in 2019 and completed in 20. That was a big accomplishment. We just replaced the Mount Hood Express lift. But
that's awesome. Got to be on that.
Yeah, but those are physical improvements, which are great. I think the thing that I'm most proud of is our team. I just think we have an incredible team. They're very dedicated. They're very hardworking. They're highly trained, highly skilled, highly competent group of people, but they're also just wonderful people just to be with, forget about work, just to hang with. And so that I'm most proud of.
Yeah, I can testify to Greg Peck. I worked with him on the transportation on the CAT board when I was there, when he and I were there together a few years ago, and just got to know him that way, and got to see him at the mountain stuff. You've got great employees up there. Every time we're up there talking, from your people parking us to lodge staff and everybody else, it's just awesome to see that. You've got a good family environment up there. It's really good.
I'm so grateful for our team. They just they inspire me every day, to be honest with you, and so it's an honor to work alongside them.
So how do you work towards, I guess the question is knowing that the economy has ebbs and flows and you can't just be a one horse show, you try to keep Mount Hood Meadows open year round. And how's that been your experience, not just for skiing, but for kids, and still experiencing all the outdoor stuff that's up there? What have you taken, steps you've taken to do that so people can enjoy that too, outside of snow skiing?
Well, so we've tried to make the winter season, try to broaden the shoulders of the winter season, because early season we can still do other activities, snowshoeing, Nordic skiing, things of that nature. And then on into the spring, when we close for alpine, we can do skinning, we can do Nordic snowshoeing. And then we have special events that are going up there, weddings and family reunions, corporate events, those types of things in that setting. And then we get more into the summer months. We do we close for about a month in both the late spring and the late fall, and that it's during that time that we take care of lots of repair and maintenance projects that are too difficult to do when guests are there, or it's not safe to do things of that nature. But during the hardcore summer season, we have hiking, we have chairlift rides, we have outdoor camps for kids, again, focusing on resilience, self-reliance, outdoor activities, learning about the wildflowers, the botany, the streams, the hydrology, the fact that Mount Hood is a dormant volcano or semi-dormant, taking kids to a funeral if they've never seen that, explaining to them the tribal heritage of the mountain and of the permit area, explaining to them, really how special Mount Hood is. It's more than just the icon of our state. It's a natural laboratory, if you will, to study all these natural elements and learn how to appreciate them and never take them for granted.
You mentioned something that caught my attention just a second ago, and you said the permit area. We hear these different permit areas expanding, contracting, and then we can delve into the Cooper Spur permit area. But why don't you talk about what that permit area means and how that works within the private-public partnership that's created with U.S. Forest Service and in the company?
Okay, so we are a tenant of the United States Forest Service. They're a landlord. They're a division of the Department of Agriculture and so forth. And when the permit was issued, the Forest Service designated the land A11, which is the federal designation for recreation, for outdoor recreation. It's approximately 3,150 acres of A11 land that they set aside for this special use permit. They awarded the permit, as I mentioned, to my dad and his group at the time. And really what that means is that we're responsible for developing all of the physical improvements such that recreation activities can happen year-round, at that area.
Okay.
And that the areas around it now are by and large designated as wilderness. So you kind of have this pocket, if you will, of land that the public can use for outdoor recreation.
Yeah, that's important because we want to save the wilderness that we have in
Right.
these different designations, and people can have the debate about certain things, but you get access to this, just a beautiful part of the mountain there.
Yeah, and it's remote, so it requires, for it to be successful, it has to have an access road. It needs parking, it needs bathrooms, it needs a lodge, it needs, access to food, access to ski school, safety. Safety is an enormous part of our culture at Mount Hood Meadows, and we're one of the few resorts that has our own, full-on reach and treat, facility that's staffed 100% during our operating season by a medical team.
Yeah, it's Providence, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's because people, they come and they do have incidents, they get hurt. That's just the inherent risk of recreating outdoors.
When you go play outside, things can happen, and there's things out beyond the control of the operator. And if you have to ski within your limits and don't do stupid things, win stupid prizes sometimes, right? And if you go launching off a big cliff and you think you can land it and find out you can't, probably shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's as simple as a guest comes from the valley, and they're at 100 feet above sea level, and then boom, they're at 6,000 feet, and they're having a hard time acclimatizing to that. We treat those folks there as well so that they are comfortable and that they can overcome, the rapid change in altitude.
Right. So I'm going to shift gears, talk about the economy and the community and what Mount Hood Meadows does for that. What type of economic engine is Mount Hood Meadows for Hood River County?
Well, I think we're one of the larger
rural economy. So.
Yeah, I think we're one of the larger employers in the county. I'm very proud that of our seasonal staff, that a fairly significant percentage of them, this is their first experience in the working world. So these are younger folks. And they go through a training program. They go through a mentoring program to kind of bring them along as the season progresses for not only their skill level, but just the basics of learning how to be a good team member and care for each other, look after your fellow team, look after the needs of the guests, and so forth. So I think there's the employment aspect. Of course, we could always use more workforce housing. We're trying to work on that both in government camp as well as in Hood River. It's very challenging in Hood River, as you know, just because of the cost of.
I'm on the housing committee. Trust me, I hear it all the time.
Yeah, anyway. So, but we continue to work on it. It's a real priority. We do a lot of leasing. We do turns for tenants type of programs and do seasonal leases with landlords that have properties available in the winter season that are in Hood River County. And then we're involved in many community activities, from Rotary to food bank groups and so forth, to try to really be a good citizen in Hood River County.
So here's a question when it comes to your employees. You said you have roughly 1,200 for the winter months. Mm-hmm. And there's those employees that go back to Hood River, or they work wherever they live at. Hopefully it's in the Hood River government camp close by and they have to travel long ways. But what do you think those employees mean for the local economies when they're getting paid and helping out?
Well, I think that they are, they're shopping in those communities. They're doing other activities in those communities. They're recreating, in those communities. And I think that many of the younger folks, these are the children of long-term, Hood River Valley residents that want to stay in the community, but they need winter employment.
Right.
And summer employment's a little easier because of not only the tourism industry and windsurfing and so forth, but of course the agricultural endeavors in Hood River County.
Yeah. Do you have a story where Mount Hood Meadows, made a family better or a business better that you think was direct with that?
Well, so many businesses in the county have both they've been created, they've developed, and then they either got sold or they left or whatever over my tenure. But I can think of a number of businesses. The Hood River Hotel is one of them. I remember going there as a kid, and now seeing, it went through a great redevelopment process. The Best Western, which used to be Eddie Mae's, when I was a kid, and just the lodging properties in the area. But I think in terms of the families that I can think of in that area, there are so many that continue to work at Mount Hood Meadows, and their entire family, mom and dad work there, and then the kids ultimately work there in the wintertime. And we're just blessed to have, I think the average tenure of our full-time year-round employees is well over 20 years, so folks come and they tell me, they go, "This is my mountain home. I like to work here. I like to be here. I like to be here kind of year round, and I like the fact that my kids can work here and they can learn skills that they couldn't learn, really anywhere else." And we have for example, we have a child care facility, so which is something that we offer to our year-round employees, even seasonal employees. And so folks are encouraged to bring their young ones there where they can be cared for on site.
That's a big one, the child care, which
it's a huge one.
And
and we have a fully licensed, very, very just really high quality daycare facility on site.
That's awesome. We touched about it earlier, but the Warm Springs Ski Day program, let's talk about that. How'd that start?
Well, okay, so that started.
What sparked it, I guess, first?
I think my dad had been talking about that with prior tribal elders. Many of them are they've either passed or they're retired or whatever. It was very important to the elders, and my father really heard this, in the 80s and the 90s, for the youth of the Warm Springs to learn about the sacred heritage and the treaty rights for the permit area. So we're talking about collection of first foods. That's roots, huckleberries, western red cedar bark, things of that nature that they could do within the permit area and were allowed to do by treaty right, and that we wanted them to come and do. And then other cultural heritage, religious ceremonies, and so forth that they could do, within the permit area. Because after all, Mount Hood is their mountain, and so much of our sustainability efforts come from teachings from the Warm Springs tribe. And so we're very grateful for that, and very grateful for the relationship that we have with the tribe. And the kids that come for the ski day, they ski, they learn about, more about not just skiing and riding and recreating, but they learn more about this sacred place it's theirs.
Yeah. So I mentioned it, you got I think it was 2006, the Silver Eagle Award. And how has that shaped and strengthened your relationship with the tribe?
Well, I'm not sure that, first of all, the Silver Eagle
partnership.
Yeah, the awards are great, and don't get me wrong, the recognition was wonderful. It kind of came out of the blue because we didn't really apply for it. We were, somehow the National Skier Association heard about it and all that, and ultimately started interviewing us and the tribe, and then they did make this award. But more importantly is that the tribe, they know that we know that this is a very important place for them. And in fact, of all the, like for example, when we build a new lift or dedicated Sahali or whatever, we invite a tribal elder to sing the dedication prayer and basically show gratitude to the Creator for even the opportunity to have such a facility in this magnificent environment.
Yeah, no, it's pretty impressive. Is there any other initiatives you see coming up with Indigenous and trying to support anything's on the horizon that you?
I think that there are more employment opportunities that I see down the road with the tribe. Opportunities for hospitality education for not only for tribal members but for all of our employees. But the tribal members, because they're so close, would present just a great opportunity. And
do you have a program that helps when I'm up there, I see tribal members and younger generation. How do they get to the mountain? Is there a lift program to get them there, or they drive their own vehicles, or how does that?
Well, over the years, we've had various shuttle programs where we send a shuttle over there to pick up employees and so forth.
Just like you do in Hood River.
Like we do in Hood River. In recent years, though, it's been difficult to get enough riders to make that program really work. And so we're kind of working on that. I think there's a bit of a shift just within the tribe itself, where there are other employment opportunities for them, both in Madras and Redmond, and maybe even in Bend, that provide maybe even better opportunities for work for their workforce than what we can offer. But we still reach out to them every year, and we still do the ski days with them.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears, and this is kind of the thing that's really driving a lot of conversation in the Capitol, but recreational liability and the crisis that's kind of happening. And why don't you unpack I think it's the 2014 Bagby ruling? Bagley ruling that happened.
Yeah,
and then the follow-up question is, how's that hit Meadows? So talk about that ruling, and then what's that costing Meadows?
Well, I won't get into the details of the case or whatever, but essentially it was a ruling that went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court that essentially neutralized the efficacy of liability waivers in Oregon for all issuers of those waivers. So, for example, my kids at the time, were in high school and they were doing sports, and I was signing the waiver on their behalf.
Right.
And I realized after that case that, okay, wow, this waiver I'm signing really doesn't mean anything. Uh-huh. And so what really happened is that decision. Basically, the Oregon Supreme Court, rather than interpret law, they legislated the situation. They basically changed the law by saying that liability releases are unconscionable, even though they were, instituted, I believe, in 1979 by other legislation, such that, because it was very important, even in 1979, that recreation service providers, fishing guides, outfitters running fishing boats out of Astoria or Warrenton, or high schools or University of Oregon, anybody issuing waivers, that they could separate gross negligence. In other words, no one is ever going to be off the hook for gross negligence. That's not what this is about. This original legislation was about addressing the inherent risk of these activities, be it football, fishing, skiing,
mountain biking, which we're really emphasizing in Hood River all the time. Right?
Yeah, mountain biking, and you can speak to the mountain bike rental places in Hood River. They are really struggling. Mm-hmm. But this got at just the inherent risk of the activity, because they knew that if we can't take care of the inherent risk of the activity, the cost of insurance will be unobtainable, it's unsustainable. And that's where we are today. So since that ruling, in the ensuing years, we've seen like our GL premiums go up close to 300%.
GL, general liability
coverage. And that's not unusual for other recreation service providers or gyms or clubs.
You just hit one, gym. Nobody would think about recreational liability, gym waivers, right?
Yeah.
Those are big ones. And so just so people understand, like, I remember buying a lift ticket. On the back of the lift ticket, once you purchase the lift ticket, on the back it talks about the liability, and you've inherited the risks of the skiing or snowboarding, whatever the activity you're doing.
Right.
Then that's just if you're skiing beyond your capabilities. Yep, shouldn't be doing that. You got hurt. But if it's gross negligence, what would be something to be somebody go, this is gross negligence? Has he got an example of that?
Oh, I guess in the ski industry, probably something to do with something mechanical, a mechanical failure someplace that caused injury.
Something on a lift.
Either a lift. I can think of in a fishing boat situation that the boat caught on fire, or because the engine wasn't maintained properly, or something of that nature that is beyond. Certainly that had nothing to do with the behavior of the user.
Right.
It had to do with the provider had some kind of, massive problem, but they have insurance for that. And everybody that I know of who's in the outdoor recreation service industry in Oregon is very aware of that and very conscientious about making sure that the products and services that they offer are as safe as they possibly can make them.
Right.
And many of those rec service providers, they provide those services just to their own family members.
Yeah.
So they take it very seriously, as do we.
It's a $17 billion industry for recreational activities in Oregon. And that, what costs has that changed since that decision? How does that affect the cost when you provide your services?
Well, I think we're living that kind of right now, because we've had to increase the cost of all of our products. It has hurt us, financially, and at a certain point, you can't pass those costs on to, the recreating public without losing, volume and losing business. And I think for us, it's caused us to really take a hard look at our capital expenditures, our improvements, because we have to sequester the financial resources to pay for these massively increased premiums, which, they're increasing double digits every year.
You said it, and we talked offline a while back, but what changes have you made to keep Mount Hood Meadows running? And I think you talked about some projects, some capital projects you just mentioned, but if you want to unpack that a little more, what have you put on hold because of this?
Well, first of all, the projects that we have done that are directly, related to safety really focus not only on our infrastructure, but on more training and advanced training for all of our staff, not only, technical training and so forth, but it comes down to, it's just really very basic concept of caring for each other. If you're looking out for your coworker, if you're looking out for other people that you're working with, as well as the guests, it reduces the likelihood, of an incident. Everybody is caring for everybody else. So I think training, caring is very important, investing in the infrastructure to make sure that all of our facilities are performing properly, operating safely, operating consistently, and the like. That's very important. Now, projects that we've put on hold, I think just recently, in the last, 90 days, is this legislative effort that has been ongoing through this session has ebbed and flowed and gone through all sorts of really an unbelievable journey. We've made the decision to curtail some of the projects that were on the drawing board for not so much this summer, because this summer we're pretty much, committed to do the repair and maintenance projects that we had already approved, but larger projects for down the road, lift replacements, building improvements, restaurant enhancements, things of that nature.
Yeah, it has a downstream effect.
Well, it does, and we're a company, because we are family held, since my dad established the framework, the financial framework, that we only distribute to our members, we're an LLC, or investors, that which they need to pay their taxes every year, and everything else is reinvested into the organization.
Yeah. So that rolls us into House Bill 3140 and its importance. And so why is House Bill 3140 such a game changer for Meadows and the recreation industry?
Well, it's really not a game changer, because all 3140 does is it reinstates what we already had from 1979 to 2015.
It resets the game what it used to be.
It just takes us to where we were, where that you have the efficacy of liability waivers throughout the state of Oregon, such that rec service providers can get insurance coverage that's affordable at a sustainable level. And we've also have an issue that has really arisen just in the last probably 4 or 5 years, and that is that carriers have left the state of Oregon. They won't even underwrite rec service providers in Oregon. They don't want to take the risk. They can't afford the risk, and they frankly think that our state is totally out of line with the rest of the United States, which it is, at least in the western states. There's no other western state that has this same type of problem that we have. We are an outlier, significant outlier.
Let's just put that on the table. Washington and California don't have this problem, correct?
Correct.
Oregon has to be special with this one.
Liability waivers are effective in the state of Washington and California for inherent risk cases.
Right. Man, so if this stalls, what do you think happens?
I think, it's hard to predict the future, but just based on what we experience, I can't imagine that some of the smaller ski resorts that are in our state, some of the smaller rec service providers, guide outfitters and whatnot, I think they're not going to be able to operate. Yeah. Because I think it's very important to know that most businesses, many businesses, have bank relationships. They have lines of credit or letters of credit. They've have loans or they have just relationships. And when you have debt, a caveat of that debt is you're going to need to provide an insurance certificate for property and general liability to your carrier in case there's a problem, or to your lender rather, your banking representative. And if you're a special permit holder, there's another layer on top of that.
Where you're special permit holder with the U.S. Forest Service.
Correct. We are a government tenant. We are required to provide evidence, show evidence every year to our landlord, the U.S. Forest Service, that we have property and general liability insurance. It's a requirement of our special use permit. If we don't have that, we're in violation of the special use permit, and the agency has the right to close the business.
Wow.
And they will not only close the business, they will take away the special use permit, and they will likely require the permit holder to return the permit area to its natural state before the permit was issued. And so, you can just follow the line of trouble that would beget.
My eyes just got really wide because I look at all the lifts you put in. You have to pull that all back.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
So are you working with any groups like Project Oregon Recreation to help push this forward?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And everybody has worked so hard to try to educate our legislators, but I think it's not a matter of really educating or convincing them. It's penetrating their core ideology and the politics that we have in our state, because we have basically a single party state, right? And
supermajority, yeah.
A supermajority. And so we have, people or legislators who are personal injury attorneys trying to listen to the case that our groups and entities have made, and even businesses have made, to try to explain to them the importance of this bill. And because they were put into office, by the trial lawyers or whatever, they're just not going to listen to that.
Yeah. Oh no. Everybody has their partners or their stakeholders that give input, and
Right.
there are some stakeholders that have a lot more input and sway than I've seen. Public employee unions. I was a union guy in the police bureau, but I've seen some of these public employee unions swing a real big stick and get some stuff done and do arm twisting to get some of their legislation across the finish line, and it is on party lines.
I think what's at stake here is not just, Mounted Meadows or other
It's the industry, right? Yeah.
It's the industry, but even bigger than that, it's the culture of our state. We are a state with an outdoor recreation culture.
Right.
We're a state of people who have great experience recreating in the outdoors. They're resilient, they're resourceful, they understand, and they're accountable for their own behavior, and they understand all that. This matter is putting our state in enormous, not just financial jeopardy, but cultural jeopardy.
You just said something that dawned on me, and it made me think of something. It's like, we are sitting in the state where the Oregon Trail came through, the pioneers. They risked everything, knowing if they'd get there or not. And now I wonder what the people who founded our state would be saying about this and the recreational liability. It's like, life happens. There's problems that happen. It's just, I think they'd be scratching their head and going, what's going on? Because they traveled across America to get here in a wagon. A wagon. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, so balance and safety and access, how do you keep Meadows safe amid the liability challenges right now?
Well, first of all, we can only do the best we can to keep our team and our guests and everyone as safe as possible. There is no way around the inherent risks of outdoor recreation activities. All the programs and education and so forth in the world are never going to completely eliminate the inherent risks of these activities. So a slip and fall, a bad, wipeout, something of that nature, whether you're mountain biking, playing golf, skiing, walking on a trail. These are the inherent risks of being outside. And I think we all are, at least should be. I know I am, my family is, we're accountable for our own behavior and our own choices. And if somebody wants to take a risk, it's a pretty calculated one,
Right.
Otherwise, they're not going to do it. And that includes only you or me can be the judge of our physical limitations, right? I can't, I don't know that you can't climb the mountain, solo.
Yeah.
But I also know that there are risks associated with that. So, there's only so much we can do given the hand that we've been dealt. And so we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying to make things as safe and as fault tolerant and as easy to experience as possible, and still maintain, the excitement and the thrill of recreating outside. I do think if we don't get any kind of legislative, relief here, for sure, there are going to be dramatic changes at Mounted Meadows, for sure.
So we've heard personal responsibility and all those things. You have to be responsible for your actions and gross negligence. But what do you say to the people that are worried about that these waivers hurt accountability?
Well, actually, I think that they augment accountability dramatically, because first of all, they provide an opportunity to educate the guest. The guest reads the waiver and they go, "Oh, that's right. This is an inherently risky activity. I need to follow, for example, the provisions of the Skier Responsibility Code. I need to read the rules of use here at Mounted Meadows. I need to understand that, and I need to abide by all that. And chances are, when I do that, I'm going to have an awesome experience." And a high percentage of our guests experience exactly that. Okay. Yeah. And for the people that know all that and decide, okay, I need to ski steeper terrain than I'm capable of actually negotiating, that's a choice that they've made. It's an unfortunate one, and so forth, but that's the choice of the guest. And this is why the inherent risk doctrine, it's just so incredibly important that we maintain that, not just for Mounted Meadows, but for all recreation service providers.
Yeah. I'm going to take something off the table, and it's going to be a question. It's like, what safety upgrade has Meadows made that's made a difference for the visitors, but you can't talk about your clinic, your hospital? That's an easy with your med clinic right there. What's another upgrade you've done that people wouldn't really notice or think about, that wouldn't averagely see?
Okay. Well, here's one that involves multiple years and multiple capital expenditure projects. But about 10 years ago, we changed our fleet of our groomers, our snowcats, from one manufacturer to another. And we did that because we thought that, and we now know, it's proven that the machines that we now use provide the most consistent, surface, the best skiing surface, allow us to do, a lot of productive snow moving, snow hauling, snow grooming, and so forth in a consistent, reliable way. Well, to be able to support that, we needed a new vehicle shop. So about 10 years ago.
I was going to ask you about that. I just learned about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have one of the most state-of-the-art vehicle shops in the ski industry, not just, in the West, but you go to most resorts, you won't see a 10,000 square foot state-of-the-art vehicle shop at 6,000 feet, and that investment was made to improve the grooming, which allows for, on-piste, really fun skiing experience, and helps reduce accidents that can occur on really steep terrain that are not groomed, because those skiers are not, it's either not open for the public, but they go there anyway. And then there's a problem, and it gives an opportunity for everybody to recreate together as safely as possible.
The proverbial, I'm going to go under the rope, even though it says closed.
Yeah, and we have that. We have provisions for what happens when that occurs, and usually
accountability.
There's for sure accountability for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one which I can just mention briefly, which I don't think many people know about, but we're one of the few resorts in the West. We're a Class A avalanche zone, and we have an M105 howitzer that's on.
I remember hearing the
Shooting Star Ridge, and so we acquire. We have several acquired targets. We do missions on snowfall mornings, and we prevent major avalanches from happening when the public is skiing in Heather Canyon.
So whoever would have guessed that if you were an artilleryman or woman in the U.S. Army, you could come work for Mount Hood Meadows and still fire off a 105.
Or you're a really awesome patroller who spent several years getting master gunner status working with the U.S. Army to be able to operate that device.
Yeah. Wow. Never would have thought of that. That would not have been on the bucket list to think you could go outside the military and do that.
Yeah.
So let's change gears a little bit. Your vision for Oregon's recreation future, where do you see that? I mean, with liability waivers or without, but let's just say we get that across, and what does that mean for the future?
I think we get legislative relief that returns us back to where we were, pre-2015. I see tremendous growth opportunities in Oregon outdoor recreation, from guide outfitters to lodgers, restaurants, other outdoor experiences, from mountain climbing to rock climbing, horseback, equestrian adventures, mountain bike adventures. We have some of the most incredible mountain biking terrain in this state, but mountain bike rental companies are not motivated to even be in that business because the waivers don't mean anything. So at any rate, if we had the efficacy of waivers and the inherent risk doctrine was upheld in the state of Oregon, our $17 billion industry, rather than shrinking, which is likely what's going to happen, will grow. And along with it will be all the other providers like Columbia Sportswear, the smaller up-and-coming gear providers, even maybe Keen Footwear, rather than leaving the state of Oregon.
They went to Kentucky.
Yeah, maybe they'd be motivated to come back here.
So you mentioned that in the $17 billion recreation industry, and I think you mentioned clothing, but was it the Great Outdoor Sports they call it?
Next Adventure.
Next Adventure. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's right. Do you think that had any play in this?
I've only read what I know in the paper, but I'd have to believe that an element of perhaps their decision to close was the dramatic increasing cost of general liability insurance.
I know. I remember going to Next Adventure and the boats, and did all kinds of stuff in there. And I remember Deke and talking to him when I was a police officer in there, and I was a city council member in Cascade Locks, trying to get him out to maybe put a little store out there, or just bring a trailer out and try to sell gear and stuff like that. And real smart guy. It was good talking to him, but to see that those stores close was kind of sad. And then the industry, and right now you said it's $17 billion industry. What if this goes sideways and there's not a fix to this? What do you think the industry looks like? What's that $17 billion looks like 5 years from now?
I think that the smaller ski areas probably are not financially sustainable. That's I think pretty maybe a doom and gloom assessment, but it's hard to see that. I think more than likely rec service providers like guide outfitters, gear providers, gear manufacturers, they're going to leave the state and go to competing states, neighboring states or non-neighboring states, where they will find a more welcoming, more supportive business climate, and waivers will be viable there. And concurrently, I think you'll see more plaintiffs' attorneys moving into Oregon.
It seems like it's always about the dollar and the attorneys and the lawsuits and the ambulance chasers and things like that. And that's unfortunate.
Well,
that's just me personally. That's just me talking.
You're a legislator, a really good one. Maybe someone should propose that there should be a cap on attorneys' fees from these massive settlements.
I'm guessing if I put that out, I'd have a target on my back from some of those organizations.
Yeah. Well,
so, hey, you mentioned that, but how can policymakers like myself and others in that building, there's 90 of us in there. There's 90 policymakers. Every year, 90 of us get together to make laws and make policy. Help not just Meadows. You're my district. I will support everything in my district I possibly can, but just the recreation industry. How can policymakers help support that stuff? You kind of touched on it, but let's kind of give it a recap.
Well, let's take the city of Bend. There are so many rec service providers in Deschutes County. why wouldn't the legislators representing Deschutes County be all over this and be in favor of it? Particularly when, there have been some significant lawsuits and awards against, Mount Bachelor and other rec service providers in Deschutes County. You would think that the legislative representatives from that county would be very supportive of this House bill.
Yeah, no, that we'll get on that. I'll follow up on that in just a second. But what's one policy you would want to champion to ensure sustainability and affordability for the recreation, besides the liability waiver, that you see on the horizon that could hurt the industry?
I think we need to address affordable housing for the workers that work in this industry, because most of the rec service providers are in remote locations because that's where the experience is, and getting affordable housing near where those services are being performed is of vital importance. And by the way, it's vitally important for pretty much every business that's in the state of Oregon.
Right. I mean, the red tape, the bureaucracy is stymieing innovation and building here. And I think when there's uncertainty in the marketplace, there's uncertainty in investment.
Yeah.
And that's just, whether it's semiconductors, whether it's recreation industry, it's anything for people wanting to come here. And is it viable for me to put 5,000 employees here, and can they afford houses? Is it going to be a good place for them to live? And if they're looking at the schools that aren't performing, they're looking at all these metrics, like, why do we want to invest in Oregon? I want people to come invest in Oregon. I really do. It's a beautiful place. I mean, Tom McCall, come visit, but don't stay. It was like, well, people are leaving now, but there's so much to offer here. And I think people lose sight of that. And, all these organizations that are about process and about these little things like that, it's just muddying up the waters. Like, they don't want anything to change.
You talked about pioneers, our pioneering spirit, the pioneers who came here and all that. We have so much that we could do. It's just going to take some pioneering, and some hard work,
Oh, excuse me. I haven't done that one on camera. Wow. There we go. No, I think you're right. We got to pioneer. We got to have the internal fortitude to, have legislators have the internal fortitude to push back on the status quo. That's what I see a lot of this is right now, is the status quo. And if you look at what's going nationally, there's a lot of pushback on the status quo. And it's just, come on, people. We want people to work. We want them to live here and have thriving businesses and people to afford here and good wage jobs and all this. But these regulations I think are really stymieing this innovation, these things that are going on.
Well, it is. It's heartbreaking for me as a native here, grew up here and all that. It's also heartbreaking for me because I have two daughters. One is at the University of Oregon Business School, another one who's in an MBA program in Denver. And they talk openly about, Dad, I'm not sure there's going to be something for me here in Oregon.
Yeah, that's tough to hear from your kids. I mean, I look at my daughter, she's 13, my son's 11. It's like, I'd love for them to make sure they can live in Hood River, but I don't know if they can afford anything.
Right.
Housing is so incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
Matt, I want to say thank you for being on the show. You've got a lot of good insights on stuff. Would love to have you back. Hopefully we can get that bill shaken out of committee and get something there to help the industry, not just the ski industry, but all the recreation industry, because there's so much that's riding on that. And I didn't realize until I started unpacking some stuff, I didn't realize it was a $17 billion industry. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. It's really been great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, back to Basics Army. You've heard it. We got to get back to the basics. What you're watching right now is bureaucracy at its finest. And we need to cut that bureaucracy, empower businesses like Mount Hood Meadows, and keep Oregon outdoors thriving for all. Till the next episode, stay safe, people.